Hey guys, Chris here. Got some new equipment, so we got a new light, a new tripod. Hopefully you guys can see a difference. You know, we're still learning how to use everything, so hopefully the work will pay off. We're going to try the new formats today. We're going to go to 2 videos a week, so one on Wednesday, one on Saturday. The Wednesday video will likely be just me showing off my own aquarium, so whether I'm showing you a tank or a cool new fish or a plant that I'm growing or whatever, it's going to be something that I'm doing in my hobby. The Saturday video will be more of like a conceptual video, so maybe I'm talking about how I personally view medicating fish, or how I personally view quarantining, or getting away from the medication route, how I think that, you know, herbal remedies, natural remedies, are kind of used in the hobby and how effective they are. We might talk about the nitrogen cycle, stuff like that, stuff that's maybe not physical things in the hobby, but that are still useful to the majority of hobbyists, right? So today, we're going to be kind of looking at 4 different tanks. We're going to be looking at the 20-gallon freshwater quarantine, which is right there behind me. We're going to be looking at the 37-gallon FOWLR tank you saw me set up a couple weeks ago. We're going to be looking at the 10-gallon Reef tank that you guys have not seen in about a year now, 8 or 9 months, something like that. And then we're also going to be checking in on the longfin mocha clownfish, because they've been doing really well, but I want to take the tank in another direction than it's going in right now, so we'll talk about that here. We'll talk about that here in a minute.
Alright guys, this is my 20-gallon freshwater quarantine tank. Currently it's stocked with about 13 neon tetras, 5 or 6 black neon tetras, 8 or 9 white club minnows, 2 pearl gourami, 1 green cory, raspberry het, and a few African dwarf frogs. So basically this tank's entire existence is just to hold fish until I can get their long-term tank set up. It is heavily stocked, but you know, all we're running is a sponge filter and a FOWLR brand heater. We do have a internal filter in here, but it's only acting as a water polisher, so there's no actual filtration going on there. We do have some live plants, just some Vallisneria, some cryptlucens, some Ludwigia of some sort. I'm not sure the exact species. Looks like some sort of lotus. And then a couple Anubias and Jaloferins and, you know, assorted rhizome plants. The long-term goal with this tank outside of the quarantine is to keep the neon tetras and the white claw minnows in here and to have a cool water community tank. So we might try to track down like a cool water centerpiece for that. I'm not sure yet, but it'll be set up like this long term too, just not with so many fish and not tropical. The substrate we're using in here is place sand, right? Just the Quikrete brand. It is a rather fine blend, but in my experience, it's not really so fine that you're going to run into issues with it always being in the water column. If you stir it up, for sure it's going to get dirty, and when you first put it into the tank, it's going to be really dusty, but that's kind of the truth with a lot of substrates. So in my experience, at least here in Kentucky, it's going to vary by region, but here in Kentucky, the play sand tends to be coarser than some other places, and I don't tend to have too much of an issue with it. I feed plenty of food to this tank. We're talking, it gets fed on an auto feeder. Just some omega-1 freshwater flakes. Then we also feed bloodworms, frozen brine, frozen mysis shrimp. Occasionally we'll do like some spirulina, so just some spirulina mixed with brine shrimp or something like that. So it does get plenty of food. The fish are all fat and happy. So yeah, that's this tank, right? I don't talk about it a ton just because really there's not a ton of plans going into this aquarium. It's kind of just a, you know, long-term holding tank for these fish, but I think it's cool nonetheless, and let's move on to the next tank. This is my 37-gallon FOWLR tank, so it's currently home to one Ocellaris clownfish. He's a Wyoming white. I've had him for about a year, going on 2 years or so. He had a mate, but unfortunately she jumped out of the tank she was in. So now I guess he is actually a she, and we will be getting him or her a mate at some point, but it's not quite the right time yet. We also have a tail spot blenny in here. It's a new addition from quarantine, you might have seen. And kind of after I added the firefish, I decided just to slowly add in the rest of the fish that were in that tank, because at that point we had already broken quarantine. So as long as we didn't overload the tank's nitrogen cycle, it didn't really make sense to keep them in that, you know, small cramped tank. So I did add him in here eventually, and he's been doing really well, pecking at algae, being really personable. Very pretty fish, just maybe not the best choice for very large tanks because they tend to want to hide a lot, unfortunately. We also have a firefish in here. This is the second fish to go onto this tank. A very cool guy, very skittish. I only see it for maybe 30 minutes a day, and if I walk up too close to the tank, it tends to run off. So not the most exciting addition, but very pretty when it does come out. We also have a royal grandma, which is a type of basslet. They can be a little bit ornery. This guy is no exception, but so far there's been no physical aggression. He has flared at the blenny a couple times, but nothing ever past the flaring, so I did watch. Nothing ever came of it. Most grandmas are all bark and no bite, so that is kind of a good thing. There's always been the exceptions, but very rarely do they get physically aggressive, so that's a good thing. And then we also have a cleaner shrimp in here, right? We have two Mexican turbo snails in here for the cleanup crew. They do pretty well. Not tons of algae going in, and the algae that we did have growing slowed down quite a bit due to this pink hue we have on the rocks. That pink is actually cyanobacteria. Kind of where I added so much all at once, we probably spiked that cyano bloom, and you know, it happens. It's quote unquote dead rock, so it's not from the ocean, not recently anyway. So it doesn't have much biodiversity, and even though it's cycled, it probably wasn't prepared for that much bioload. So all the water parameters test okay. You know, we've really pushed it to the limit, and you know, that starts to allow tons of nuisance algae, cyano, stuff like that to start growing in. I think we would have had a bigger algae bloom, but I don't have a very powerful light on this tank. It's just a Phoenix Stingray. So I think if we had like a Reef light or even like a FOWLR 3.0 or something on this tank, we would have seen more hair algae and less bacteria. I have been monitoring for signs of, you know, disease since we kind of broke quarantine, but so far everything looks good. I haven't seen anything. I'll keep an eye out, but I think we're in the clear. Of course, it's not been that long, so who knows, but I think we're good. We may try to do some soft corals in this tank just to see what I can grow with this Phoenix light, because I'm interested to see if like any of the pest corals will do well. We're thinking like pulsing xenia, green star polyps, the ugly purple mushrooms, the yellow polyps, stuff like that, stuff that, you know, tends to thrive in almost any environment. I want to see if it'll do well with this. So yeah, that's this tank. Alright guys, and this is my 10-gallon Reef tank. You guys haven't seen this tank in about a year or so. We did have a crash due to a rock flower nymph spawning in the tank. I actually have a video of that if you want to go check that out. But you know, I didn't change out quite enough water to keep up with it, so we did have a tank crash. We lost most of the coral, so we pretty much everything except for these kind of bleached out zoas here, and this Montipora cap that's clinging to life ended up passing away, unfortunately. Over the past month or so, I've started restocking the tank with new coral. So now we have this green hairy mushroom, these new new assorted fire nysoas, and this new red and green blasto. So they're all doing pretty well. The blasto is cranky. It kind of opens and closes throughout the day. I think it's possibly due to flow and flow acclimation, but I don't have a ton of low flow areas in this tank, so I may have to play with the equipment and kind of see what I can figure out there. The fish in this tank are just two percula clownfish, so they're true percula, not ocellaris. They're captive bred. They're pretty much the same fish as ocellaris are for your average person. They've just got I think an extra dorsal spine or something along those lines. Very similar fish for sure. They've been in here for almost 8 months, I want to say, quite a while. Then we have like a turbo snail and a bunch of dwarf ceras and I think 1 or 2 hermit crabs in this tank. I really need to rearrange the cleanup crew. You know, the turbo snail is going to outgrow this tank, and then, you know, I need to add in a bunch of hermit crabs and stuff. But this tank has been kind of on hold for me. I really enjoy coral. I really enjoy reef tanks. But when it comes to me actually keeping a tank like that, I have a hard time really getting into it. I'll get into it for some short amounts of time, and then I kind of burn out on it. So that's why I'm kind of trying to just do, you know, easy, soft, and easier LPS corals. And I'm really hoping that, you know, if I just kind of make this tank as low maintenance as possible, I'll have better luck. Where this tank is pretty well established, it may not look like it, but the water is pretty pristine. It stays, you know, 5 to 10 ppm of nitrates all the time, regardless of whether I do water change once a week or every 2 months. It kind of hangs around that level. Now, of course, if fed heavily, it would raise over time, but, you know. Phosphates run between 2.2 and 0.4, which is high, but not insanely high. And, yeah, I use a Gralea Nano 240, a Tetra Preset 50 watt heater, an Aqueon 10-gallon hang-on-back filter just for media storage, and then an Aquanite light over this tank, and it does pretty well. I just really need to spend some time and dial this tank in, but once it's good, I think it's going to be great. This tank will also be moving onto a rack within the next couple months. It's on my kitchen counter right now, and that is a terrible place for it. So we'll be moving that guy pretty soon. This is my 10-gallon FOWLR tank. Currently it's a FOWLR. We're thinking about doing a macroalgae tank with it, but for now we're gonna keep on calling it a FOWLR so I don't commit to anything. It's just home to 2 longfin mocha clownfish at the moment. We will be adding in a green clown goby pretty soon. He's still in quarantine, trying to get him on, you know, eating frozen foods better, but he will be going in here eventually. You can see I've got a couple pieces of macroalgae in here. One is Gracilaria hei. I probably slaughtered that, but it's just a red species of Gracilaria that's super popular, really easy to grow. You can see right now it's got a bunch of epiphytes and just detritus on it, and that's kind of the problem I've had with macros, is they tend to they don't shed parasites and stuff that easily. So I'm gonna have to figure out a way around that. I still need to do a bunch of research and, you know, really dive back into it, because it's been a year or two since I've really looked into macros that much. The other macroalgae right now is covered in hair algae. It was a hitchhiker that came in on a Zoa frag. I actually bought the frag because I saw the macro on it and couldn't ID it, so I got excited. And it's done pretty well, but in this tank it's just not survived. I mean, it's still alive, it's still got some texture to it, so it's still there, but it's just hidden under this massive clump of hair algae. And unfortunately, most things that will kill hair algae will also kill macroalgae, because they're really one and the same. One's just more of a nuisance than the other. So unfortunately, that's probably not going to be the easiest thing to save. I can manually remove it, but it grows back so quickly that I'm afraid I'm just going to end up disturbing the macro so much I'm going to kill it. We also have some hair algae growing in on the rock. You can kind of maybe see it floating in the current there. It's not too bad. I attribute most of that to all the light we have on this tank. We have 2 stock lights from a 55-gallon aquarium, which on a 55 is pretty low light, but on this tank ends up being pretty high light. I am slowly adding sand to this tank, just a little bit at a time, because it did come out of an old tank. I kind of dried it out, but unfortunately it's got a terrible smell to it. It's just, I'm sure there's tons of, you know, decaying waste and stuff in that sand, so I'm just adding it little by little. And yeah, that is probably some of what's feeding all this algae. I'm aware of that. But I don't really have a great way of cleaning the sand that I trust. You know, with rock, I'll occasionally bleach soak it, which will absorb some of the organics, but I've never done it with sand, and it seems like a bad idea to me. It might be fine, but I don't want to risk it. I'll just add in little by little, and we'll do it that way. So long-term for these plants for this long-term plans for this tank are more than likely a macroalgae tank. No promises though. And I would like to eventually breed these clownfish. They're a relatively expensive pair. They're very pretty. If you've ever seen the longfin milkweed clowns in person, pictures and videos don't do them justice. And of course they're clownfish, so what's not to love?
Alright guys, that's the video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you could see, the new changes in equipment and stuff like that. Hopefully you like the tanks. Of course, they're always going to be in progress. Some of them more than others. With the Reef tank, I really want to start putting some time into that. It's just right now with me starting a new job, trying to start learning how to edit and shoot video. It's been a lot, but hopefully we'll start getting those tanks onto track. And from there, hopefully we can get you guys some more good content. Thanks for watching.